What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers. Have you missed me? I have missed you. Today, we are talking about what happens when the dream dies, as well as what I was doing during my hiatus. Let's get into it. Okay, so you've probably seen the video of former NBA player and current FC Barcelona player Jabari Parker answering a reporter's questions about the end of his team's season as a result of losing a playoff game. And he's answering all the questions well, nothing particularly noteworthy, but solid answers. Until he was asked to speak on what this year, his first overseas, was like for him both on the court and off the court. This guy, who was literally seconds before giving these well thought out answers, is all of a sudden speechless before starting to weep. It was this incredibly human moment, and the reporter, who also seemed to be caught off guard by the reaction and dropped a wild "what's wrong, boy," which also got no response, finally ended the interview after what felt like an eternity of silence, but in reality was probably like 45 seconds. What I'm picking up in that video in Jabari's reaction, and I don't think I'm alone in this, is a person who is mourning the death of his dream. He's trying to process why he's overseas, because in his mind, it wasn't supposed to end up like this. And it's easy to see why he feels that way. Jabari grew up in Chicago, a prep basketball mecca, and he was that dude going all the way back to high school, probably even before. A lot of people consider him to be the best high school player to come out of Chicago, and think of the other players who are on that list with him. Isaiah Thomas went to high school outside of the city, but he was born and raised in Chicago. Mark Aguirre, Eddie Johnson, Terry Cummings, Nick Anderson, Juwan Howard, Antoine Walker, KG did his senior year up there. Derrick Rose, Anthony Davis, the list goes on and on. And those are just the guys who came through the city and went on to have long NBA careers, not just the guys who are fantastic high school and college players. Jabari went to Simeon, where D. Rose and the late great Benji Wilson went, and had a ridiculous career. Simeon's longtime boys basketball coach retired before Jabari came through. That coach had a rule against freshmen being on varsity. The new coach didn't, so Jabari became the first freshman to start on varsity in the school's history. As a result, he also led them to 4 straight state titles. Sergio McClain, who played at Peoria Manual and the University of Illinois, is the only other player to start on 4 straight state championship teams in Illinois. Back when Sports Illustrated was still Sports Illustrated, they had Jabari on the cover as a junior, calling him the best high school player since LeBron. Now, we've seen enough stuff like this now to take it with a grain of salt, but the hype was very real at the time. And Jabari continued to back it up in his only year of college at Duke, playing for Coach K. He was the only freshman to be named first team All-American. As a matter of fact, there weren't any sophomores either. He seemed like the real deal and was selected 2nd overall in the NBA draft by the Bucks. Cleveland picked Andrew Wiggins number 1 overall, then sent him to Minnesota for Kevin Love to make LeBron happy in his return to the Cavs. What a time to be alive in the league. Now, Jabari wasn't setting the league on fire, but he was playing well enough to where he probably would have been in the Rookie of the Year conversation and made the All-Rookie first team, except he tore his ACL just 25 games into the season. But hey, injuries happen, he rehabs, and actually makes it back very close to the start of the next season, basically picking up where he left off until the second half of the year, when you start to see that phenom come out as he puts up 17.5 points per game over the final 33 games. He carries this momentum into his 3rd season in the league and takes on a bigger role as Chris Middleton misses significant time due to injury, so now you've got Giannis emerging as a star and Jabari. He's putting up 20 points per game, 6 boards, nearly 3 assists, hitting 37% of his threes, and looking like a future all-star, and then poof, it is over again. 51 games into his 3rd season, he tears that same ACL. And that was basically the end of any hope of Jabari being a star in the NBA. He was 21 years old. He did hang around the league a bit, even putting up 15 points or so a number of seasons, but they were only partial seasons due to injury and moving from team to team. After that second ACL tear, he never played more than 39 games for one team in a single season. The injuries obviously were not his fault. Some people's bodies just aren't made for the grind of professional sports. Sports are hard. But he also didn't do himself any favors. He was known for his scoring, and he was once asked after signing with his hometown Bulls if he could become as good on defense as he is on offense, and he said, quote, "Well, I don't know. I just stick to my strengths. Look at everybody in the league. They don't pay players to play defense. There's only 2 players historically who play defense. I'm not going to say that I won't, but to say that's a weakness is like saying that's everybody's weakness. I've scored 30s and 20s off guys who they say try to play defense." Yeah, obviously that's the wrong answer on several levels. Jabari did not have the physical tools to be a great defender in my opinion, but at the very least, you have to lie and say you're going to try to be better. Compare this mindset to a guy Jabari was compared a lot to early on who also had a lot of injuries, Grant Hill. Grant was way more athletic than Jabari even after the injuries, but still had to completely remake his game after he got hurt. He was never the same player, but was able to hang on and have a long career where he was very effective because he was willing to do more than just score. Again, how good was Jabari going to be at defense? Probably average at best. And one bad interview answer doesn't damn you to hell for eternity. But to me, this was the first sign that this was a guy who still hadn't come to terms with how things were changing for him. He had a brief stint in 2021, 2022 with Boston, and that was it for his NBA career. A career that didn't look anything how any of us expected it to look, especially Jabari Parker. This is a guy who just turned 29, and he's looking at other people in his draft class, whether it's Wiggins, Joel Embiid, Jokic, who was drafted in the second round, or his former teammate Giannis, and seeing them sign these huge contracts and win awards and all that while he's out of the league. And that's kind of how it goes for everybody. Most people have their athletic dreams taken from them against their will, whether it's getting cut in high school, not being good enough to play in college, not getting drafted, or getting injured. That's just how it goes, unfortunately. I think what really makes it sting for people like Jabari is few of us get that close to making it. And then when you're flushed out after getting that close, it has to do a number on your psyche. There's Greg Oden, number 1 overall pick. He was supposed to be the next great big man. His high school and college teammate, Mike Conley Jr., is still out here playing. The guy who was drafted after him, Kevin Durant, is still playing at a high level too. Probably one of the best 20 or 30 players ever. And Greg was supposed to be even better than that, and when you saw him play, you believed it. Even in the brief flashes when he was healthy in the NBA, but his body couldn't do it, and his mind couldn't handle that. He drank too much, he got addicted to painkillers, he got arrested for punching an ex-girlfriend. Or look at Marcus Lattimore, high school superstar who stayed home to play for the Gamecocks and help lead them to an SEC championship game. If you've seen the Gamecocks play football recently, you know how big of an accomplishment that is. Overcame one knee injury just to suffer one of the most brutal knee injuries any of us has ever seen, and he sat here and told me exactly what that did to him mentally, how dark things got for him. It's a tough pill to swallow when all your hopes, dreams, identity, self-worth, everything is put into this one thing and you feel like it's snatched from you. But what if that's not what's actually happening? What if there's something bigger out there for you? Miran Fader wrote about Greg last year, all he's been through, and how now he's putting the pieces back together. He's back home in Indiana, he's got a family, he's the director of basketball operations for Butler University. And while Marcus did talk about the bad times, he also talked about where he is today, a man who seems freer now than he's ever seemed, writing and performing poetry out in Oregon. It's hard to process when you're in it, that's true of everything, but it's my hope for Jabari that he gets to this point one day as well. And this isn't just a thought for former athletes, but for anybody who feels like they've had something they wanted ripped away from them. Sometimes that opportunity you thought you needed isn't actually that at all. It's leading you away from your true purpose. And the universe or God or whatever you believe in is giving you these no's, these rejections to protect you. These are guardrails to make sure you stay on track. Don't worry, I am not kicking off a motivational speaking career, just something to keep in mind, especially as someone who thought I'd be playing sports forever myself. It's crazy to see what I'm doing now. The former athlete to sports media pipeline wasn't always as popular as it is today. Perhaps that was a good thing. But it's kind of crazy because a lot of what I do now feels very similar to things I used to do when I was playing basketball, except now instead of basketball camps or open tryouts, I go to conferences like the Black Sports Business Symposium in Atlanta. As the name suggests, This is open to anybody in and around the sports industry, not just media. So ticket sales, front office, community engagement, really any job you can think of in the sports industry, and there are way more than I imagined. The setup was pretty cool. It was a Wednesday through Saturday event, with Saturday being a job fair. The programming was built around panel discussions. There would be one feature talk each day and a bunch of other discussions built around that for you to pick and choose which ones you wanted to attend based on your interests. Day one, I got there like first thing in the morning. The venue was incredible. The day one stuff took place in the Georgia World Congress Center. The rest of the days were in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium where the Falcons play. Anyways, I take the MARTA there the first day, get there super early accidentally. I saw there was a 10:30 session, so I was like, okay, cool. I'll sit in and check that one out because I couldn't remember why it wasn't on my schedule in the first place. They had this event app where you could plan out each day. I walk into the little lecture hall and I'm the first one there because, again, I'm super early and check-in was super easy. And one of these weird things I worry about, especially when I'm this early to something, even though it's pointless, is where to sit. I almost always pick the seat on the end of the aisle so I can stretch my legs out. But do I go to the front, somewhere in the middle? I have no idea how many people are supposed to be here. Maybe I sit in the back and let everyone fill in front of me. It starts filling up and I notice everyone has a different color badge than I have, but I don't think anything of it. The speaker was a gentleman by the name of Jeremiah Brown. He played football for Wagner College, a small school, but he was signed by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And just like we just talked about with Jabari Parker, he's thinking he's made it, but before he even plays in a regular season game, he suffers a career-ending injury, and he goes from being NFL player Jeremiah Brown to working at Home Depot. So he takes us through what that did to his mental health, how he overcame it, and how he got into the education field, and now what he does as far as leadership development and student athlete development. Now he's really talking a lot about what college students need to do to be successful. And very quickly, since it was also a very interactive discussion, I realized those different color badges mean that I'm sitting in a presentation meant for college students. So I'm laying low and I almost made it through, but at one point we broke off into these small groups to discuss why we picked the major that we picked, and I had to come clean that I am in fact 35 years old. But it was still incredibly useful to me as someone who didn't go to college for anything sports related other than to play. He covered a lot of stuff related to networking effectively for someone who dreads networking such as myself. The next session, which I did plan to be at, was something similar but for young professionals, which I feel like I am. It was made up of a panel of employees from the Falcons and Atlanta United soccer team. Shout out to Nicole Dennis, Kelly Jones, Sekou Thornell, Byron Ross, and Nandi Hall. It focused more on the day-to-day of working in sports and how outside factors affect that. Sekou handles digital media for the United, who have had a tough season. They just fired their manager, and he was talking about how he's had to adjust his content strategy based on that. Like, you just can't post some super positive video when the team just got blown out, but you do have to be prepared for any result. And then how the comments on the post always turn into people calling for everyone's job when things are going bad. After that, Vince Pearson led a discussion with Ryan Howard. Yes, 58 homers in a season, Rookie of the Year, MVP, World Series champion Ryan Howard, about what he's doing with Major League Baseball in terms of working to grow the game globally. They're targeting a lot of countries where cricket is popular since it's an easier transition to go from one bat and ball sport to another. I guess he's been over in the Middle East a good bit doing this. Also, on June 20th, he'll be at the Giants-Cardinals game at Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, I hate both of those teams, but this is a historic event because this is the oldest professional ballpark in the country and the former home of the Birmingham Black Barons of the Negro Leagues. The final session I went to that day was the fireside chat between Zena Keita, who covers the Warriors and does a lot of great work over at The Athletic, and Carrie Champion, who really needs no introduction but was the moderator of First Take when it blew up with Skip and Stephen A. Carrie is with CNN now and also hosts her own podcast called Naked with Carrie Champion. She walked us through her career from graduating from UCLA to working local news to a job with the Tennis Channel where she had to learn about tennis on the job to working on First Take. She also talked about having to earn respect from Skip and Stephen A, which was a really interesting conversation to look back on after everything that just went down this week between Stephen A and Monica McNutt. Carrie didn't point fingers, but just watching how Skip and Stephen A move, you certainly get the picture. She also touched on deciding to move on from ESPN and told a hilarious story about finally meeting her idol, Oprah, and bursting into tears. Day 2, we're moved over to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. If you haven't been, you have to go. It's incredible. They served us breakfast and lunch right on the field. It was wild as hell. The first session of the day that I went to was a talk about how athletes can best utilize all things NIL related and maximize their brands with Willard Brown from Design 31. We think of NIL mostly in terms of athletes from big schools, but he does a lot of work with mid-major athletes as well. The most notable part of all this was his entire presentation was New Jack City themed. He was even dressed like Nino Brown. CMB, we all we got, if you know, you know. Then I attended a session detailing the relationship between sports and philanthropy. It featured lawyers like Kimberly Haynes and Tracy Bransford, the director of community engagement for the Memphis Grizzlies, Erica Newsom-Hill, and former WNBA player and current philanthropist, Rusha Brown. They covered a lot of ground on what both athletes and organizations look to do when getting involved in local initiatives and the role they play when it comes to driving social change. Couple of fun facts about the panel. Tracy was general counsel for Prince, and for my low country people, Rusha Brown grew up down here and played high school ball at Somerville before heading on to Furman. Now, I originally found out about this conference from Megan Hall, who I had on my Above the Fold series. She's covering sports for USA Today now. She also saved me a seat in the second row for the panel of the day, a discussion about the rise of women's sports and how to cover it. This panel featured the head of U.S. Talent and Development for Prime Video, Amina Hussein, the head of Sports Partnerships for Prime Video, Charlie Neiman, Basketball Hall of Famer, 3-time WNBA champion, 2-time NCAA champion, and VP of Basketball Operations for the New Orleans Pelicans, Swin Cash, and one of the best sports personalities in the game, Taylor Rooks. Now, this took place before the world lost their mind over Kennedy Carter fouling Caitlin Clark, but obviously there had been plenty of discussion about how Clark was being defended before that and how other players need to take it easy on her since she's bringing attention to the league. Swin and Taylor both had very strong thoughts on this that can best be summarized as sports are supposed to be competitive. I completely agree. The Clark stuff has been covered to death and I'm burnt out on it at the moment, but I'm sure I'll go more in depth at some point. The short version of my thoughts is you're supposed to go hard at your opponent, and playing physical defense is part of that. That's been basketball forever. We wouldn't bat an eye if this was happening on the men's side. Michael Jeffrey Jordan had the largest impact on the economy of sports of any athlete ever, and the Pistons devised the Jordan rules just for him, which were basically force him to a help defender, and if he got to the paint, knock the shit out of him. When Kobe was at his peak, Raja Bell, Dante Jones, Aaron Aflalo, you name it, were out there clotheslining him, tripping him, whatever they had to do to try to slow him down. Same with Steph Curry. Matthew Dellavedova had to get an IV. He was so dehydrated from hacking him in the NBA Finals. Imagine if one of them or their fan bases came out asking opponents to take it easier on them. They'd get roasted. But women play sports and all of a sudden we forget that it's physical and competitive. Anyways, let me get my influencer on real quick. I left the conference to get lunch that day at the Municipal Market, which isn't too far away. All kinds of stuff in there. I got burrito taco nachos from Tijuana Tacos and also tried the fried whiting from Tilapia Express. That's about as good as fried fish is going to taste that far inland as far as I'm concerned. I also had a lavender latte from Three Peaches, Gelato, and Coffee. Lavender was the theme of the day, apparently because I stopped off at Hop's Chicken in Ponce City Market for an incredible chicken biscuit for dinner before heading up to 12 Cocktail Bar to try their lavender sour. It's exactly what it sounds like, a whiskey sour, but with lavender. They might have actually used gin, I don't know. It was the only drink I had two of. It was that good. If you're into bourbon, they also had a really good drink called the Cheat Code, had all kind of citrus flavors. I only had one because I still had a day left of the conference and I wanted to survive. The Cheat Code was recommended to me by, I think she was the hostess, Mashia. She's an artist as well and was working on a piece in the lobby and also showed off this awesome black superhero comic book she was working on. Check her art out on Instagram at Breathe by Mashia, Michea. BNAI. All right, the final day kicked off with a session about connecting with audiences using emotions when you're telling stories. Obviously something I'm interested in. The panel was led by Thomas Bennett, the senior VP at Fleischman Hillard, a global PR agency. Panelists included Cortland Bragg, a director and producer with NFL Films, who is obviously heavily involved in Hard Knocks and the Netflix series Quarterback, where they followed Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota around. Also, Rashina Warren, who is the director of social media with the Women's Tennis Association, Gerard Littlejohn, who has been on the team side and the agency side of marketing and social content, and journalist Clifton Brown, who has been with the New York Times, Detroit Free Press, Indianapolis Star, and is currently a staff writer for the Ravens. It was just a neat look at what certain stakeholders are looking for in these stories and how this connects with the audience and the importance of humanizing athletes, especially today when it's easy to log into an app and hate somebody. The main session of the day was a fireside chat between Brandon Scoop B. Robinson and Baron Davis. Baron was talking about his career and also his entrepreneurial journey and how that started when he was playing, when guys weren't really into that, and now it's continued into his post-playing career. He also talked about his latest venture, which is an app he's developed that's a social network type thing for athletes, entrepreneurs, creators who want to network to facilitate different kinds of investments. Speaking of that, former Browns receiver Andrew Hawkins was there to talk about his gaming company Status Pro. Imagine if Madden was virtual reality. That's what this is. You are literally playing the game. It's really cool, really innovative stuff. His co-founder, Troy Jones, is a former Maryland quarterback. They spoke on how they used their football experience not only to design the game, but also leverage relationships so they could get a licensing agreement with the NFL so they have all the NFL teams in the game. If you're someone who is a fan of the NCAA football game that hadn't been out for like a decade, you know how important those licensing agreements are. They also talked about the struggles of being black in the tech space and not being tech people in the first place and trying to get taken seriously and all the rejection they faced during the time they were trying to build this game. So yeah, just a really great experience. I hope to be on a panel one day. I will be on a panel one day. And if you're in the sports industry or interested in the sports industry, I would recommend going. It opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. I'll put the link to the Black Sports Business Symposium website in the show notes. Also, check out 12 Cocktail Bar, Ponce City Market, the Municipal Market. If you have any specific questions for me that I didn't answer here, by all means, hit me up. Feels good to be back. I'm exhausted, had to knock the rust off, but we are here. Appreciate you watching, listening, rating, subscribing, reviewing, and sharing. This has been another episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. I will catch you later.